Perhaps more than any other game in the Legend of Zelda series, Breath of the Wild is a game in which Link, the series protagonist, is presented as being alone in his fight to save Hyrule. The game opens with Link awakening in the Shrine of Resurrection, with no real memories of how he got there, or the events leading up to his near-death. There are items left for him to collect. Clearly someone knows he's there and cares enough to provide him with some basic clothing and tools, but as you leave the shrine and look out over the Great Plateau, you see Link as this one solitary figure, almost insignificant in comparison to the scope of the world around him. While the game's opening scenes do provide Link with some light character interactions, each of these ultimately serve to reinforce that Link is alone on his quest. His guide is the ghost of a king long since deceased. The call to adventure comes from Princess Zelda, a lone voice holding back evil for the past 100 years, inside a castle that you're likely 100+ hours of gameplay away from actually being ready to reach. Besides a ghost, and a voice whose significance you have forgotten, there's not a single living person for Link to interact with on the Great Plateau where his adventure begins. Even once the player gains the ability to leave that plateau and venture into the world, they will find that companionship, where achievable, is sparse. This is a Hyrule ravaged by war. There is no equivalent of Ocarina of Time's Kokiri Forest to think of as home, or Wind Waker-style grandma to come home to for a batch of soup. There's no companion spirit like Tattle in Majora's Mask, and there's no grand central hub city showing regular people living their lives like Twilight Princess's Castle Town. There are characters to meet, and lives being lived, but they're spread out across the land, separated by large stretches of the world filled with puzzles, combat, and secrets for Link to discover and overcome by himself. While Breath of the Wild does feature a series of champions, characters whose help Link can enlist to help on his quest to defeat Calamity Ganon, the game keeps those characters at a distance, whether we're talking about the champions of the past or those of the present. Link's greatest emotional bonds in Breath of the Wild are the bonds that he formed 100 years ago, with the sarcastic and arrogant Rito Rivali, the confident and determined Gerudo Urbosa, the lovable Goron Daruk, or Link's implied love interest, the soft and gentle Zora Mipha. While we see Link form strong bonds with these heroes, those bonds exist solely in flashback form, and are underscored by a knowledge of how those bonds were severed. Each hero, more than 100 years ago, was sealed inside their own divine beast, which had been taken control of by Calamity Ganon. Each champion was defeated by an elemental Blight Ganon. They perished, and were not as lucky as Link to be brought back from the brink of death. By comparison, Breath of the Wild's modern-day champions, Yunobu, Riju, Sidon, and Teba, are all given a lot less screen time by the game. While some characters fare better in this regard than others, we all know everyone loves Sidon and wants him to get married to Link in a wonderful queer royal ceremony someday in a future sequel to Tears of the Kingdom maybe, where he gets a divorce and then realises he's really actually into Link. These heroes, by and large, are given very few cutscenes to flesh out their characters. We don't see Link socialising and bonding with these new heroes. They serve a functional purpose. They assist Link in gaining access to each of the game's divine beasts, before becoming secondary considerations. Watching reaction videos for Tears of the Kingdom trailers on YouTube, it was amazing but unsurprising seeing how many people referred to, for example, Riju as Urbosa when Riju appeared on screen. I understand why. Urbosa is the name that you hear every time that lightning magic blasts are deployed in Breath of the Wild. She gets a lot more mentions in cutscenes than Riju does. The heroes of the past in Breath of the Wild were simply allowed to be characters that Link and the player had more reason to care about, who had been dead for 100 years and Link was isolated from. Now, I want to be clear, I don't think that Link's isolation as a character in Breath of the Wild is necessarily a bad thing. Breath of the Wild is a video game trying to return to some of the Zelda series' roots, and by giving the player room to quietly explore the world on their own terms, without a plot breathing down their neck or characters constantly beside them, it helped allow that game to mechanically do what it did best: create a space for freeform open-world exploration. The game excels because you can always see a few interesting points in the distance, and on the walk to one objective you're likely to spot 3 or 4 new sub-objectives as you're meandering along your path. It's a journey about letting yourself get lost and explore off the beaten path, and Link's isolation really benefits that in many ways. You're not on a fixed path between predetermined towns and character beats that you need to follow. You're not being funneled toward the story. You're free to save the world in your own way, even if that means running straight to Ganon's living room and beating him to death with a handful of tree branches and some hastily cooked durians. Breath of the Wild wouldn't be the game it is, if not for forcing Link to be alone and setting his own path saving the world. Breath of the Wild certainly isn't the only Zelda game to focus on the journey of Link as an isolated hero. Most notably, perhaps, the original Legend of Zelda for the NES was a key inspiration for Breath of the Wild's open-world design, and shares a lot in common with that game tonally. In that game, Link starts the adventure alone in a woodland clearing with no explanation of his mission, outside of that found in the game's manual. He has to grab a weapon, head out into the world, and, besides the occasional stranger in a cave, must save the world completely on his own, with nobody to turn to for support. Though, that said, I do want to take a second to focus on something that I just glossed over. A moment that I guarantee anyone watching this kind of Legend of Zelda video will be intimately familiar with. Right at the start of The Legend of Zelda, the player is given a sword by an old man in a cave, who offers Link a few words of advice. "It's dangerous to go alone. Take this." This line, somewhat infamous today, is something that I think about a lot with regards to Zelda 1's overall feeling of isolation in tone. While it's easy to think of Link's journey in that game as a single Hylian's quest to save the world without a single piece of backup, without this moment of kindness from a stranger, most players' journeys in this game would end here. Link cannot do this alone. He needs to accept support. His victory against Ganon could not have happened without the help of those he met along the way. Without this man, his journey never begins. Okay, I lie, you can technically do a swordless run of the original Legend of Zelda, but you kind of get the point I'm going for. The game's most memorable moment for most players is a moment of accepting help and support, and recognizing that Link might be the one to strike down the villain at the end of the day, but he cannot do so without the help of those around him. NPCs in Zelda games may not be destined to wield the Blade of Evil's Bane, or to get a piece of the Triforce, but they are crucial to Link's adventure in even the most isolated of Zelda games. We see this in Breath of the Wild, where without the help of a Ghost King, Link would have been unable to depart the game's tutorial area. We see it more obviously in Link's reliance on the King of Red Lions in Wind Waker, or Midna's ability to assist Link in wolf form in Twilight Princess, or the Happy Mask Salesman transforming Deku Link back into human form by teaching him the Song of Healing in Majora's Mask. Link's adventures are never truly about one person saving the world without help and assistance. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, released in mid-May 2023, is in my view a masterpiece of a video game. From the way that the game takes a familiar world and fills it with new unexpected changes and additions, to the new gameplay abilities and how they interact to create engaging puzzles, I genuinely adored my first 150-hour casual playthrough of the game, and was gutted when that adventure naturally drew to a close. While there are things that I miss about the format of older, more linear Zelda adventures, Tears of the Kingdom is a fascinating adventure that undoubtedly delivers on certain aspects of the series better than perhaps any other title. One aspect of Tears of the Kingdom that I've been thinking about a lot the past few weeks since beating the game is the story's attitude to companionship, and how this game, compared to its precursor, addresses that well-known quote from the original Legend of Zelda from 1987. Warning, spoilers ahead for Tears of the Kingdom. So, in Tears of the Kingdom, it's made very clear early on that Link cannot save the world alone this time, and is going to need help from others to have any chance of victory. From watching the Master Sword shatter when clashing with Ganondorf's gloom attack in the opening cutscene, to Rauru having to save Link's life and replace his arm to stave off corruption spreading through his body, Link's adventure right from the start shows him beaten down and helpless to win without support. One of the trailers for the game even made this really clear. We got a line of dialogue in which Zelda says explicitly, "Link, I don't think you can do this alone."
But Link, I am not sure you'll be able to stop him.
This is further reinforced when Link places the Master Sword on an altar in the Temple of Time, and sends it backward through time to Zelda, dressed in Zonai garb and separated from Link by countless thousands of years. Before digging into the way that companions are handled in Tears of the Kingdom, I want to spend a bit more time talking about Zelda's story in this game and the role that she plays in Ganondorf's eventual defeat. The Master Sword is presented in Tears of the Kingdom as a weapon whose strength comes in part from the magic that was originally used to create it, but also in part from its unique ability to grow in power. The sword can, if bathed in concentrated magical power sources, grow stronger as a result. We've seen a similar idea explored in other Zelda titles, bathing the sword in sacred flames, or using the magic of sages to unlock the true strength of the blade. Usually this is a small action, needed to overcome an evil that's a little stronger than the last evil that was faced, but the amount of time that Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom has been sealed under Hyrule Castle has allowed his power to grow and fester, creating a villain that the blade is immeasurably outclassed by. Zelda in Tears of the Kingdom is in the unique position of knowing how big of a gulf the sword's power needs to overcome, while existing in the distant past. She has the time to find a solution, and realises that she is the only person both willing and able to help. Link does not have the time or access to strong enough magic to get the blade to a point where it can save the world. But she can. Zelda sacrifices herself, becoming an immortal dragon, losing her conscious mind in the process. She embeds the broken Master Sword into herself, using her power as a mythical beast to, for thousands of years, repair and strengthen the blade. She finds a way to get back to Link, and to make his quest one that has a chance of success, by making an unbelievable sacrifice, and trusting that Link will understand what she did for him, and make use of her sacrifice to save people she may never see again. In terms of direct help that Link receives from another character, there is perhaps no better example of Link needing help from someone than this in the entire series. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Beyond Zelda's sacrifice, the other major changes seen in Tears of the Kingdom that, to me, signal a shift in the way that companions are thought about, are the treatment of the modern-day champions, and the integration of a small army of unprepared but determined Hylian villagers into the adventure. Starting with the modern-day champions, Yunobu, Riju, Sidon, and Teba from Breath of the Wild all return in Tears of the Kingdom, albeit with Teba's son Tulin taking over from his father, something that was foreshadowed toward the end of Breath of the Wild. There's also a fifth hero, but we'll get to them separately shortly. Unlike Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom makes each of the game's four main champions, this time dubbed sages, a much more integral part of the storyline of their in-game town, as well as the dungeon that they are associated with. Each character travels with Link on the way to the dungeon for personal reasons, has their own personal conflicts, and has their own reasons to stick with Link, rather than just standing outside the front door of the dungeon and waiting for Link to be the hero unassisted. Tulin wants to prove that he's brave and strong enough to protect the village, and to escape being seen as a child. Riju has seen her community under assault by waves of enemies, and has had to move her villagers underground and wants to be a part of saving them. Sidon is watching his people be slowly poisoned, and has to take matters into his own hands, with his father, the king, out of action. Yunobu was briefly mind-controlled, and waits to find his fellow citizens in the thrall of an addiction that he is one of the only Goron not currently afflicted by. Each of them wants to be on this quest, and isn't just going to take Link to a doorway and then sit around until the world is saved on their behalf. Mechanically, this manifests in a handful of ways, namely NPC companions following Link around, helping out in combat, and unlocking useful new abilities that Link can harness with their help. I absolutely love this aspect of Tears of the Kingdom. It's one of the aspects of the game that most caught me off guard on my first playthrough. It's such a small thing, but having these people who have told you they want to save their communities actually come with you and fight by your side, offering abilities that make it easier to save the day than it would be alone, marks a really big tonal shift from Breath of the Wild, and one that I think acts as a beautiful way to progress this series in a direct sequel. Tears of the Kingdom is a challenging game. I know some of you will disagree. You'll say in the comments that you found it super easy, you never died once, and that's great for you. I still think it's fair to call Tears of the Kingdom a difficult game, particularly when it comes to the balance of combat difficulty in the early game. Enemies in Tears of the Kingdom hit hard, right from the start of the game. It's not uncommon early on to encounter enemies who can wipe out Link's health almost entirely in a single hit, and more so than Breath of the Wild, The game's world feels initially a little overwhelmingly punishing in certain spots. While I wasn't initially a big fan of this combat balance, it is something that I appreciate a lot more in hindsight, having finished my adventure and seen where it goes. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's dangerous to go alone. This time, it's not taking a sword with you that's necessarily going to be what changes that. It's taking your friends along for the ride. While I initially assumed that Tears of the Kingdom sages would only be companion NPCs during the journey to, and completion of, dungeons, the game allows Link to summon ghostly forms of these sages after the dungeon is complete. You can have as many of these heroes summoned at once as you like, and they'll run around with you, helping in combat, and offering their unique powers to Link. By the time you've reached the late game, Link is running around Hyrule with a squad of powered-up heroes to help distract enemies, deal damage, draw aggro, offer additional combat abilities, and better handle enemy groups. The game is balanced so that it's dangerous to go alone until you take your friends with you. Now, a lot of what I've said so far about the sages does apply to the game's fifth sage, Mineru. I put her aside a little in this discussion in that she's handled more similarly to the champions in Breath of the Wild. She's mainly seen as a person in flashback memories, and a little less connected to Link directly. But I think there's still something to be said for her addition to the team as someone willing to trust her friend, Zelda, and give up her physical form just to travel with Link and take one final attempt at fighting Ganondorf. Her addition to the team mechanically is really cool, but so is knowing that it wasn't only Zelda that was willing to put that kind of trust in you. Zelda described you in such passionate terms that someone was willing to trust you without having met you, and pledge herself to your cause and to fight by your side. Additionally, I really appreciate that Tears of the Kingdom contains a series of missions that can be discovered where Link encounters roaming groups of amateur heroes, attempting to storm enemy strongholds full of monsters and protect their fellow villagers. All too often in the Legend of Zelda series, we lack any real sign that anyone but Link in these worlds recognises the threat that they and their loved ones are facing, and are able to find the courage needed to try and do something about it. We see isolated examples, like Tallow in Twilight Princess who harbours aspirations for heroics, or that game's resistance movement in its soldiers, but rarely do we see average people in these games show any kind of willingness to take up arms and fight for their communities. These small pockets of resistance in Tears of the Kingdom are not a formal, organised army. Famously, we see some of them running into battle, wielding maybe a mop for a weapon and a bucket as a helmet for protection. These are not trained warriors, but they are people willing to stand up and fight, and Link can come in and fight by their side, but if you don't, they're still gonna do it. They know their quest isn't likely to change the world overnight. They're aware of the Blood Moon and its ability to bring back defeated enemies from the dead. They still fight, with or without Link, to keep on top of the situation and help Link save the world. Link cannot be everywhere at once. In such a large world, Link can't be saving every villager at every moment. These little combat encounters help flesh out the world, showing that Link isn't doing this alone. He can't do this alone. Link may be the one to eventually save the day by defeating Ganondorf, but until then, there are countless people at risk in their local communities, and others fighting for their safety, keeping equilibrium and preventing things from spiraling. They're buying you time until you can deal the winning blow. While Link may save the day, a just world would remember that man with the bucket on his head as being just as much of a hero in the retelling of this game's events. I don't think it's a bad thing that Breath of the Wild's adventure feels as lonely and isolating as it sometimes does, but I also believe that without that isolated tone, Tears of the Kingdom's story couldn't shine as bright as it does in contrast. Tears of the Kingdom excels for me because as I'm fighting that final dramatic boss battle, I know how many people are either fighting by my side in the moment, or are elsewhere in the world fighting their own battles to be a part of saving the day in their own way. Playing Breath of the Wild, I was reminded of the feeling of taking on The Legend of Zelda, as Link, the lone hero saving the world without support. Playing Tears of the Kingdom, I remembered that, right from this series' beginnings, it has always been dangerous for Link to go alone, and that he would be wise to take all the support that he is offered.